Hi, Reuben. How are you? Sorry
Hey,
about
Amanda.
that.
That's okay.
How's your morning been?
Yeah, really great. How about you?
Yeah, not too bad. Can't complain.
Fantastic.
So we're just waiting for a few extra people to come into the room, and I've been watching what's happened. So we have a few apologies, but there's people who want to watch this on replay. So we'll just wait for a couple of minutes until a few others get in.
Fantastic.
Water. Hi, Gillian. How are you?
Good, fine. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you.
I've just actually tagged you in a Facebook post about your Remarkable.
Oh, have you? Oh, okay. Haven't
I
used
just wanted
it
to
yet.
find out how. Oh, haven't you? Oh.
No. What's happening? I've got two little bundles of stuff to scan, and then that's going to be my reward for actually getting rid of that scanning.
Okay.
So, but my friend is using it, and she absolutely loves it.
Okay.
So it's probably one of my. Hopefully, I might be able to get to it. Over the next lot of school holidays over the Easter holidays, and the boys are home, so I'll be able to play around with it. But yeah, but she's absolutely loving it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know I keep looking at it every now and again, and yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to bite the bullet, but yeah, we'll think about it again.
Yeah, I'll let you know as soon as I'm using it.
Okay.
Reuben, do you have a Remarkable?
No.
No. Okay. So it's sort of like it is like a tablet, but it feels like you're writing on paper.
Right.
So it's called a Remarkable, and so you can basically upload your PDFs to it and write on it, and then basically goes back to your document management system, or you can be just taking client notes, then it'll upload straight to your document management system.
Wow.
But it feels like you're writing on paper as opposed to writing on a tablet.
Yes.
And so and it also will convert your writing to text and a whole heap of things like that. So they're
even
about
my
8. Yeah, I know. Mine's pretty bad. Don't worry. But I usually write things down and scan them in, but it'll save a lot of that. So that it's by the time you get the stylus and the pad and everything that you hold everything in, it's only $1,000. But it's really good apparently. So we had it on order. I think the thing is we had it on order for about 3 months, and sort of the anticipation, and then when it came, we didn't really have time to sort of get stuck into it. So I'm using it as a bit of a reward. Yeah. So well, let's get started because there are a lot of people that are going to be watching on replay. So first of all, I would like to welcome everyone here today, including our guest, Reuben Sweeney from Link. So thank you for joining us from New Zealand. I'll do a little bit of a really quick introduction so that you can share more about yourself and about Link during the presentation, but it's really informal, Reuben. The reason why I do these sorts of masterclass is quite often a lot of our members are not necessarily ready for some of the particular software and that sort of thing, but they're quite curious. And what I find is when they actually see a demo and hear more about it, it actually makes them be thinking, oh, I'll put this off for quite a long time. I'm not quite ready, to then being, okay, I really love this particular software. What have I got to do to be able to either create some time to implement it, or to create some extra income to be able to pay for it, and things like that. So that's one of the reasons why we do that. They don't want to bother you individually to have all these demos because they don't feel that they're at the right stage. So I guess why it was really important today also, so Reuben, his company's called Link Reporting. And basically, it's a lovely add-on, connects to Xero Practice Management to provide practice management, reporting insights for yourselves as practice owners, but also for your team to see the visibility of their productivity and all of those sorts of things. So we're going to talk a little bit about some benchmarking and what Reuben's seeing across the clients that he's working with. And I actually was introduced to Reuben through one of my coaching clients who's actually using Link Reporting and absolutely loving it. So that was the reason why, I got Reuben on here today. But Also, in the last month or two, I've also been talking to a lot of practice owners who are thinking of changing from predominantly Handysoft or potentially MYOB, but mainly Handysoft, and jumping over to the Xero platform. Now, I use MYOB Accountant's Office. I loved the control report that I got out of this productivity, and I believe Handysoft has something similar. In Xero, that's not as comprehensive as what you may be used to. So that's where Link comes into it. So I think we've got a lot of people looking at jumping ship, so then they can see some of these things. So this might be a downfall if they're saying XPM doesn't do this when they're comparing it with Handysoft, but with your product, it's going to do everything that and more than probably what they were used to with Handysoft. So, so you're welcome once again, and yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Reuben, for the next 40 minutes. It's interactive, so if anyone doesn't have any questions, pop them in the chat box. But we want you to ask as many questions as you want. So yeah, and Reuben will most certainly be able to answer them all.
Fantastic. Thanks for that intro, Amanda. Yeah, so basically we work with Xero Practice Manager to extend the ability of Xero Practice Manager to provide reporting to practice owners so they can see what's happening in their practice. For those of you that are more familiar with Xero Practice Manager, you will know that Xero Practice Manager has quite good reporting, but only in very specific areas. It doesn't report across things very well, and it certainly doesn't compare reporting-wise to the likes of AO or APS or iFirm or even Handysoft in some areas. So a lot of the people that jump on the Xero buzz, they move 100% cloud, and they get all their customers on their Xero Blues, and they get their practice on cloud-based apps that run on Xero, but they end up sacrificing something in the reporting department often, and that they have to then supplement with spreadsheets or manual calculations that are less frequent, less reliable. So yeah, we've spent the last 10 years recommending, implementing, training, and supporting people into XPM, and then we've spent the last 10 years asking Xero to improve its reporting for XPM. And so we spent the last 3 years doing something about it ourselves, and that's what I'll show you here shortly today.
Reuben, I think it's suffice to say that from the Xero perspective, because I know this is a question that has been asked a lot, from what has been said in the forums, they don't really plan on doing much in this space. And even in any of the space with the add-ons, that's their ecosystem, that they want add-ons to be able to provide things that were previously all-inclusive in a lot of our practice management software. So I don't think that they have got plans to be entering this space from what I know. Yeah.
Well, I've been waiting a long time. So yeah, I don't foresee it happening personally. And, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need to exist. Xero would deliver all the reporting that people need to run their practices, but that's just not the case. So yeah, that's why we've had to do this. Yeah, so I'll take you through some of the reports that we can generate, and happy to jump in with any questions along the way. There's a few things that we do that are different. One is that, unlike a lot of reporting apps, one of my bugbears, even with reporting apps that connect to Xero, is that you plug in an app and then it's just like a good luck. That's kind of what the attitude is from software developers. Plug it in, and if your data's not good, then that's your problem. Because we have that background in implementation, and we have literally written a book about Xero Practice Manager recently, if your data is not good, it's because of your setup, your training, or your processes, and we help you with that. Normally, when people meet with us, we spend the first 30 days helping them with their Xero setup, making sure they're capturing the data that they need to run their practice, and then the next 30 days actually delivering the reporting they need. So yeah, it's quite a long relationship, I suppose, in software world, but not long in the scheme of a person's life or business. So yeah, the other thing we do that's a bit different is that other reporting apps that connect to Xero Practice Manager are limited in that they use the API, which is the data that Xero Practice Manager transmits to say, you can use this data, let's other apps use, basically. And the benefit of the API is that it's instant. Whenever you do an invoice, it transmits that fact. Whenever you do a timesheet, it can transmit that fact. Create a job, it can transmit that fact. However, the API is limited in that the data that is available to be used by the likes of other reporting apps that run on platforms like Power BI, you can't get the detail that you need to make the decisions you need. So what we do instead, or in addition to that, is that we synchronize XPMs at night, every night, depending on where in the world you are. The weakness of that for us is that obviously the reports I showed today are only current as of this morning, but as you'll see shortly, for the types of decisions we make, that's current enough. The strength, though, is that we actually have access to a lot more data, so that our drill downs are better, the insights are better, the reporting is better. So yeah, that's the kind of decision we've made there, and the kind of things that makes us a bit different. Can you see my screen, Amanda? You're muted, but I think that's a yes. Yeah, okay, cool.
I'm just going to pop in the chat box. Sorry, I just unmuted myself. If people are using timesheets, so I was wondering if one could actually put in the chat box if they are using timesheets or not.
Cool.
If you are currently using it, so we can just see a bit of an idea currently using timesheets. Right. Perfect.
Timesheets, yes. Man, I could talk all day about timesheets, but that's not.
No, but I just was wondering because you were talking about time and billing there, and I thought,
yes.
Just making sure that
a common cause of confusion. Common cause of confusion is that about 15 years ago, mainly in New Zealand and Australia, accounting practices adopted fixed fee invoicing, whether that be fixed fee in advance or on completion or fixed monthly recurring type arrangements. And they thought that now that my timesheets are not directly influencing my invoicing, I can ditch my timesheets. However, we still live in a world where time is our biggest cost. It may no longer be the driver of our revenue, but it still is a significant cost of production, if you like, for the services we deliver. And so, yeah, you can you can fix all your fees, but you still need to capture timesheets to see how do I need to price my services, what how much money do I make on my clients, and where and who, how are my people performing, who is struggling, all these questions that are really important. Yeah, so that would be my advice around that. Cool. All right, we'll get into some of the reporting we do. So all the reporting I'll show you here today is in addition to what's already available in Xero Practice Manager and probably a lot of the other apps that you use. There still are some good reports that you should be using if you're using Xero Practice Manager. So this is just additional to that. So we do practice level reporting, like higher level reporting around how your practice is performing. We do team and human level performing. That's something the XPM really struggles on. We do client engagement pricing and profitability type reporting, so we can decide where we may need to adjust our fees or whether we can do more for a client under the same fee. And then finally, we do look at jobs at risk or what's currently happening in our practice to see where I might need to intervene or who might be struggling on a job or what services we might be getting sucked into as part of an existing scope that should be outside of a scope, for example. So I'll just take you through some of the highlights in here. We'll start with our work in progress performance report. This looks over the last 12 months and features every timesheet, disbursement, invoice, write-on and write-off that occurs within your practice. There's two numbers I look at on this report for people.
Baby, you finished your bits?
We'll wait for this to load. Cool. I'll just talk to December actually because I don't have demo data here for January, February, March. However, the two numbers I look at on this report, one of them is this one here, 1.56, if you can see that. That is the WIP multiple. And what that is WIP days, but expressed as a month because this is a monthly based report. This is the average duration between timesheet and invoice for a practice. And so this would be the equivalent of about 45-ish days, 46 days between timesheet and invoice. People have a good understanding in my experience of debtor days, the time between invoice date and payment date, but not a very good understanding or grasp of the average time between timesheet and invoice. And it's equally as important. Most practices I meet, that number sits between 1 and 2, being 30 to 60 days. The practices I meet that don't manage their WIP too well, like one I met this morning, was more in the order of 75-ish days. And if you've got to think, like, if I'm paying my staff monthly, for example, and the average time between doing a timesheet and generating an invoice for that time, and then I get paid 60 days after that, the time between timesheet and payment is actually, upwards of 100 days in that example. And I'm paying my staff every 30, for example. So yeah, you're automatically in a cash deficit if that's the case. And a lot of accounting practices I meet run enormous overdrafts. Banks really like that because they've got to fund all their wages to deliver the work in order to do an invoice in order to get paid. So the tendency is for practices that are doing more fixed fees, they actually have a much lower WIP balance because they're invoicing in advance, or a greater proportion of their fees are in advance. So that's reducing this number basically. Yeah, so that's one number I can instantly tell whether a WIP balance is acceptable or not for a person and what we can do about that. I'll show you next. The other number I look at is this write-off percentage. This says in the month of December for this example practice that for every $1 of billable time we did, we only managed to invoice 77 cents. And that's not great. Normally we'd see a number in that box between -10 and 0. Write-offs, however, can be very lumpy. Because we now, most practices will have some portion of their engagements that are on the fixed fee basis. The timing between when an invoice is generated and when a write-off is recognized is never the same anymore, unless you're 100% time and cost. So they can be quite lumpy, but when you look at it over 12 months, this is a number you may see, -8% or -9%, for example. And yeah, normally we'd see that sit between -10 and 0. And for the practices that manage their, what this indicates to me is that your pricing is good on the whole. You're good at, your team are good at delivering their services, and your processes are squared away. But that's a very general statement. However, practices I meet, when I normally meet with them for the first time, sometimes it's in the vicinity of -15 to -10%, and they're writing off 15 cents for every dollar that they're doing. And it's for every 10 staff you have, that equates to about 100 grand a year. It's quite 200 grand a year. It's quite a lot of money. It's for smaller practices, write-offs hurt you twice. When you're a bigger practice and you've got 20, 30, 40 staff, you can actually afford to wear write-offs a lot more because you've got more people to spread that across. The ups and downs you can wear across more jobs and more people and more clients. But when you're smaller, if you're writing off, say, $500,000 in value, that's not only foregone revenue, money that's not revenue, but it's also capacity for you. That's $500,000 worth of time value that your people could have been working on other stuff. And that's what I find hurts the smaller practices, like 20 or fewer staff, most. So they're particularly interested in their write-offs and work in progress. What I find when we get into the team performance stuff is that bigger practices that we deal with are really interested in human performance, because by the time you hire 20, 30 people, the chances of all of them being star performers are pretty low. You probably hired some duds at some point, or people that need to be improved, or people that are performing really well and need to be recognized. But when you're smaller, you've got an intimate team, you've got a pretty good idea about how people are going. You're less concerned about things like individual productivity or write-offs or average hourly rate and stuff like that. But you should be very concerned about what this number is in your business, what the value of that number is, and then what our write-offs are. Because it costs you twice, essentially. With all of our reports and link reporting, you can drill into these numbers, which is something that XPM doesn't do very well. If we wanted to see what our $74,000 worth of write-offs were, then you could drill into that number. And that would break it down to the timesheet level, so we could see who and what jobs and which clients and which activities incurred those write-offs. So this is a very big report, but just to interpret it for you, for this particular job, these are the people that worked on it, and this is the value of the write-off on that job. And then what we do is we basically rearrange this information in other reports that let you look at, well, how effective is Curtis in the month of February, or how well priced is this job, or how good are we at delivering this service, for example. So this is kind of like the lowest level of information, I guess. This micro transaction that occurs on each timesheet when a write-off is incurred, and then we roll that up to look at various elements of a business. Any questions on that? No. Feel free to fire away in the chat and I'll endeavour to answer them as we go. What I'll get on to next is this number here. The next question people want to know is, how can I make that number smaller, that $311,000 there? So for that, our customers use the work movements report. This report is how people actively manage their work in progress. So one way we do this is by job manager. Depending on the size of your practice, maybe when you've got about 8 to 10 people, most people start to look at having someone in the middle between the people delivering the work and the people managing the practice. There'll be somebody in the middle, managing, assisting, reviewing, or something to that effect. And we normally call that person a job manager. Sometimes smaller practices actually make each of their individual staff a job manager of that. They're ultimately responsible for the performance of that job being on time, under budget. However we do that, this is the kind of report we want to see, because whoever is responsible for the timing and the value of the invoice really controls the work. The time is kind of determined by the people that work on the job, but that person, the job manager, can decide what are we going to invoice and when. So what we're looking at here, I'll just actually run this for December because I don't have any time in March at the moment. I'll just interpret this information for you. This is a very large practice, but you should be able to get the idea. The tendency is for job managers to carry forward. No one really wants to wear a write-off, but it's actually good and bad news when we have a write-off. Good from a work perspective because we have a more reliable understanding of the value of unbilled effort in our practice. It also informs all of our pricing and our performance decisions. When we carry forward, and then in June, just write off $500,000, then it creates a lot of lumpiness in our performance throughout the year and can be quite misleading for people. So, and the tendency is for job managers to do that. So this is looking at all of the WIP balances as of the end of December. And I'm just sorting by closing WIP to see which job managers have the highest balance. So Fiona here has the highest WIP balance as of the end of December, but that's not necessarily bad. Fiona probably just manages the most clients or the most jobs or the most people. What I look for is change. So Fiona's actually done a good job at reducing her work in progress balance. The tendency in most practices I meet is for this number to increase by $5 to $8 every month-ish, just to pick a number. But yeah, it's every month. It would go up $5 to $8, and then by the end of the year, you end up writing off a whole lot of time. So we want to make sure that our job managers are maintaining or reducing their WIP balance month to month by either keeping up with the invoicing, like the invoicing is offsetting the value of the time that's going in, or we're applying write-offs early and often where necessary. What we want to see is, if we drill into this a bit deeper, these are all the jobs that make up that balance for Fiona. And what I look for here is not only jobs that have a big WIP balance, they're obviously a concern because that's a lot of time that we've yet to recover or invoice. I'll also look for old WIP. So this job here is a good example for Dave's Dunnies. We started the period with 3.4, no time was added. So I know this job's not actively being whipped on in the month of December. And we ended the period with 3.5. And I'd be asking, are we able to generate a progress invoice, or what's holding up generating an invoice here? Are we waiting on somebody? Are we waiting on something? What is preventing us from generating an invoice here if I was Fiona? These are the questions I'll be asking. And if you drill into that number, this will show you how we arrive at that number with all the timesheets to date, write-offs to date, invoices to date. And if I was Fiona, I might go and talk to Tim. And these are all the timesheet narrations from Tim. And you can get an idea of where we're at with this job and what we might need to be doing on it. Yeah, so that's one way people actively manage their WIP balance. Cool. Another really good way, you can actually run this just for Fiona. So instead of Fiona having to scroll through everyone else's jobs, if we group this by client and say, only show me Fiona, actually I'll pick Cam in this example. Cam, this would be, if I was Cam, I'd run a report like this, maybe every week or maybe every month, to identify the jobs I most need to invoice or look at invoicing. So this is the same report, but just for Cam, and these are Cam's clients, and these are the jobs that relate to that. And what you can do with this is export that out and email that to Cam and say, hey Cam, start at the top of this list and work your way down, basically. Tell us what you need to invoice, or tell us what you're going to be writing off as a PDF or CSV, whatever he's more comfortable with. Something we're working on at the moment is a button up here that says schedule. So we can actually say, prepare this report across all of our different sorts of reports in this way, grouped in this way, filter this thing out and this thing in, sort this direction, and send it to these people on this frequency, in this format. So then, they don't have to log in and do this, but it's due for release shortly, hopefully. So one other way I'll just touch on that people use to actively manage their work in progress is by job state. Depending on how your job states are set up in your Xero Practice Manager, it's different to every practice, but they normally look a bit something like this. Work is not in, work comes in, it's in progress, the bulk of our WIP tends to sit, then it goes to a review for somebody. Depending on how many stages of review you might have, eventually it gets filed and then it gets archived. So what we want to look for, there are some places that WIP goes to die. And some common places WIP goes to die are in review, when it's waiting on people to review, and where it's waiting on a client. I think we don't actually have one in this example, but waiting on client queries is another place that goes to die. And so, or directors to sign off. We can see we have $7,800-ish sitting on directors' desks right now. And these are all the jobs. But more relevant to our decision right now, or conversation right now, would be to change our second layer from job to, say, partner, so that I can say that we've got $7,000 sitting on people's desks, and most of that sitting on Yasmin's desk. And if I go a bit deeper than that, this is a summary of all the work for review that's on Yasmin's desk. And so if Yasmin was a director, I could say, I could export this out and send this to Yasmin and say, hey Yasmin, here's a summary of the time, so that she can review the quality of the work and the time at the same time. She can also use this report to prioritize. She might start with this job, for example, thumbs up consulting, instead of starting at the top and working your way down. That all contributes to reducing the average time between timesheet and invoice for a practice. Cool. So that's WIP. WIP's pretty boring, but really powerful if you can get your head around it and how to use it. I'll just touch briefly on service profitability because it might interest some of you. One of the things that XPM, and as far as I'm aware, not a lot of other practice management apps do, tell you what you're good at doing. The service profitability report shows you all the services you offer and then shows you how much time they suck up from your people, what the value of that time is, how that might convert into revenue or not, and where your write-offs occur, and what your average hourly rate might be. So you can see here we've got all of these headings. Underneath each of these these are all the tasks that people are putting their time to basically, and we let you group that up into some buckets. So we can say that advisory time makes up 2/7 of my practice in terms of time, makes up 1/6 of my value, but only 1/5 or 20% of my revenue, for example. And I can start to look at some comparisons here. I can see that my advisory revenue services only produce 41% margin, and it's a lot lower than I'd expect. My average hourly rate on advisory services is $106 per hour. And whenever I do it, for every dollar of advisory I do in my business at the moment, we're writing off 30 cents. Now that would tell me that we're not very good at delivering advisory services, or I grossly underprice our advisory services. If I'm pricing it down here, we're always going to be having write-offs. So to get to the root of this, you would drill a bit deeper and look at all the services we offer, and this is where all our time's going. So you can start to look at it at a time-by-time basis. You can see Xero conversion is in this. We put 304 hours there in the last year. The value of that time is $40,000, but we've only invoiced that 18 grand worth of that, probably because it's been on a fixed fee. So either we've grossly underpriced this service, we have grossly underestimated how long this actually takes to do, or our people need to get 53% better at delivering it through training or process or documentation or automation or something like that. That's the answer, could be all three, is under that number there, $21,000, where you look at the individual job, the individual person, the individual client, and you go, that's that example. And then you start to draw some inferences around what can we do to improve the delivery of the service, or should we continue offering the service at that price or not? Yeah. So this is all the kind of, this is the level of detail you need to have good conversation, basically. I'll move on now. That's kind of a higher level report.
I guess one thing there, Reuben, is I think especially for small and solo practice owners, it's getting that pricing right. And it's always like, oh, I don't think it'll take that long, or they're not actually realizing what goes into some of these jobs, whether it's themselves doing it or whether it's clients. And I think we err on the side of caution because we don't want to have that challenging conversation with a client saying,
100%.
oh, well, they want, we think it should be worth $4,000 this job, but look, I don't know, if I just do some rough calcs, maybe I could do it for 2.5, and that's what you're, maybe that's what their previous accountant was charging, but they might not have been doing a correct job. So I think when we've got this information for us, no matter whether you've only got 1 or 2 staff, or even when you're on your own, I think this takes the emotion out of the pricing, and it's actually giving you that the validation that you already probably know that you're underpriced. It's one of the biggest things a lot of people say to me, I know my prices are too low, I know I need to put them up. It's really hard to get the gumption to be able to do that. And, but when you've got this information in front of you, and this is exactly what I did, when I was in practice, I had this stuff, it actually made it easier for us to work out a price, but it also showed our staff members that this is what it costs to do this job. If we don't charge more, we're actually losing money on these things. So I think it's good for so many different purposes, and it's whatever's going to resonate with yourself and your practice, but it does take the emotion out of things.
Totally. Yeah, before I jump to pricing, I normally first look at, that is the most common cause of write-offs occurring, is pricing, because the time we know the least about a job is when we price the job. Then we learn about it often in the first year we need to do the job. But before I go and have the conversation with the customer, I first want to square away in my head, well, did this job go as well as it could have possibly gone, in terms of process and delivery? Did it go from hand to hand, or do we have someone pretty switched on working on it, who knows what they're up to, and the job went about as smoothly as it could have possibly gone? Yeah. If that's the case, well, we've only got one option left, really, and that's pricing. Yes, but it's good to use that, look at the detail here and go, oh, actually, no, we had a junior staff member assisting on this. Therefore, there was a lot more time. There was a lot more value there. And so that is the cause for this particular write-off. Doesn't mean we don't have a pricing issue, but in this particular example, that could have contributed. Yeah. So that's the,
Yeah, absolutely. When I've had a look at some of these, like drilled down in with some clients over the years, I've looked at some of these stuff and I say, look, this is right off in this job. And they go, oh, that was because such and such did it. Okay, right. Can we go back a year before? And then they looked at the year before and they're, oh, okay. There was a write-off on that year. And like the themes are, there's a write-off for consecutive years, no matter who's doing the job. So it's not just a staff training issue, it's actually no matter who's doing that job. So it's quite often the quality of the work that's given to us by the client. So I think when you've got these stuff, no matter who the staff member is, so you might say, yeah, err on the side of caution, let's give the client the benefit of the doubt that it may have been an internal inefficiency. So let's do that for this year. But if it keeps happening, this is the model that is unsustainable. So yeah, that's what I'm finding that when I'm seeing these, in real life too, Reuben.
Same. I'll jump, since we're talking about pricing, I'll jump to a client profitability report over here. This is a really good one if you're about to meet a client and what our customers use. One way to run this report is at the end of every month to see which jobs have gone well and which jobs have not. So if we look at this let's look at it for March. This looks at all completed jobs. So all of these jobs are finished. That's right, I don't have data for March. Give me a second. We'll just look at December. So this will show us all of the, grouped by client, all of the jobs that we finished in March. And what I do here is I sort by write-off percentage. And I like to start with the good news because it cheers me up. These are the jobs that went really well. So here's a job here, Ed's Edibles. Looks like we did a couple of different jobs for them. Put in 2.25 hours in total. The value at that time was $370, but we managed to invoice that for just short of $1,700. Wow, awesome. So either I priced that really well or the people who were doing this job did a really good job. And the way I normally tell is by the estimated time. If I had estimated this to take 6 hours and it took 2.2, well, the people who delivered it obviously did a really good job there. If it took 6 hours, and I thought it would take 6 hours, then I probably priced this really well. But yeah, this is the write-up that we made on this job. So the average hourly rate on this job was $740 per hour. That's definitely worth getting out of bed for and a good customer. And to go a bit deeper, you can go and look at the specific jobs and then the specific tasks. And then you can see here, this is where the time went. You can go to the fourth layer of this report and go and say, well done, Cam. And Cam will appreciate that. So you work your way down your list to look at the jobs that have gone really well. Equally though, probably more value in looking at the jobs that haven't gone well, because what I really want to know, I can't recover these. These are all in the past now. But what I really want to know is this going to occur again next year? So here's a job for Poncho Limited. Did a couple of jobs for them, it seems. But these jobs were put in 35 hours worth of effort and capacity. The value of that was 6.4, but we only managed to invoice that for 3.9. Again, probably because it was on a fixed fee, or if it was hourly rate, we had to write off a lot of time. So we wrote off 39 cents for every dollar of effort we put into that job. We made a very slim profit on that, and the average hourly rate on this was $110. So what I want to know is why. So you can see mainly it was occurred on this job here, the general tasks. Real common one with general tasks is that we don't talk to the customer ahead of time before incurring the out of scope activity. It's just as bad to do the work in scope because they get the write-off in a different location. But if there is something that's outside of the scope of your engagement, I see it really frequently. People don't have a very good process for their team putting up their hand or asking or confirming on what basis are we invoicing this, or where should I be putting this time, basically. Is this within the scope of what we currently agreed, or should we be charging separately for this on a fixed fee or an hourly rate basis? When that conversation doesn't occur, you end up putting 15 hours against something, racking up a bunch of time, and only being able to charge like for the last part of that where you go, oh, by the way, we're going to charge you for this. and this is what ends up happening. Yeah. So this might be a process problem, for example, or it might be the people who worked on this. If we go and talk to Ted in this example, or Greg, go and ask them and say, hey, do we tell the customer that this was going to be charged separately? And if so, when? And if not, what can we do differently next time to make sure that happens? Yeah. So those are the sorts of conversations you'd have with this. But provided your people are squared away and your processes are good and you're talking to your people who are working on these jobs, I'd be looking at next year's engagement if it wasn't general task, but it was just a general annual type engagement. Our next year's fee should be somewhere probably between these two numbers as a guess. Yeah, so if it's not our people and it's not our processes, then it has to be our pricing. So we know that they need this much work. We know the value of that work is this. So what are we going to invoice them next year for 2022's work? Yeah, and that's a conversation I should have now. Yeah. So that's a good way to run this report at the end of every month, just to kind of like an after action review on the jobs that went well and the jobs that did not, so that I can give my clients the heads up that next year, based on the amount of work that we did for them this year, and it's likely to repeat again next year, that their fees will change. A good way to run it also is for the last 12 months, but specific to a client or a client group. If you deal with a lot of groups, you can say, only show me, let's imagine I'm meeting Aaron's architects tomorrow. I'm meeting Aaron tomorrow. He's got a few entities I look after for him. This will show me for the last 12 months, all the time that's gone into all the various entities. There's only one in this example. But inside this, I've got all the different jobs I've done for him over the last year. And then the value of that effort, what I've invoiced him. And then this would be a good one to look at, because I could say, oh, yeah, we're definitely writing off a lot of time on this. Why? Okay, well, we put a lot of time into this activity. Why? Okay, I'll go and ask Alison about that. Alison may say, I did some time this year that's going to save me time next year. It's not going to take 14 hours next year. It's going to take 6. And I go, cool. Okay, don't worry about it then. Or maybe she goes, actually, it's really complex. There's some stuff here that we didn't anticipate when we first met with this customer. It's probably going to take us long next year. And we go, great. That's also good news, because now I need to go and talk to Aaron about this. Yeah. So these are the sorts of conversations people have. Yeah. How are we going for time? We all right?
Yeah, we've got plenty of time. We've got another 20 minutes. So if anyone's got any questions, if you want to ask a question, you can either raise your hand by this little the reaction tag there, or otherwise just pop it in the chat box and we'll keep an eye on what's happening in the chat box.
Sweet.
So please ask questions because this stuff is really, really important.
Cool.
In terms of your profitability, efficiencies, job turnaround times, bottlenecks, client service, you know. Yeah,
regardless of what you're using, these are the sorts of things that people these are the metrics people are looking at to run their accounting practices effectively. Yeah. So you might be able to take the data you already have within your practices on your existing system and maybe find the reports that kind of equate, perhaps, to some of these things. Something else that people get quite excited about for us, and something a big weakness of XPM is the human performance, or measuring how people are performing. So I'll just show you the team performance report for the month of December. Just going back in time. One of the things we do is we take all the people that work at a practice and we let you group them up into buckets. And those buckets are normally determined by some sort of KPI or expectation around performance. So for example, Reuben, I might be in the billable team, I might be in the Sydney office, I might be an intermediate accountant, and I might be in Dave's team or bookkeeping team or something like that, or SMSF team or something like that, Team Dragon or whatever we might do for teams. Anyway, the reason we put people in these buckets is because I'm a billable team member, the expectation on my time, on my priorities might be that I spend 75% of my day working on customer work and 25% of my day spending on internal or management or training and that sort of stuff. So by putting me in this bucket, we can see that for the month of December, the productivity of our billable team was 56%. So that says they spent 56% of their time on customer work and the balance on internal work. And I would say that's a lot lower than we'd expect. And so I'd go a bit deeper than that. And we'd look at the individual people. These are all the people we put in this bucket. You can see there are some people that had the right priorities and were focused on customer work, but there are definitely people that had a lower productivity than we would expect. And what I'd want to know from here is Cam spent 64% of his time on customer work. We can see 37 hours went to internal activities. And if I drill into that, this will show us what Cam was working on when he wasn't working on customer work. And what I need to decide is Cam the best person to be working on these things? Because the opportunity cost of Cam's time, being a billable team member, is $116 per hour. So if he's involved in internal projects, that is the opportunity cost to me of that. And provided I'm happy with that, that's cool. But if there's someone else who's cheaper or not as valuable who could be doing that stuff, then let's get that person doing it. Because if I can make that if I can make that 37 or 27, then I have an extra $1,200 in my bank account every month, basically. It's pretty easy maths. So I look for like low productivity or lower than normal productivity and a high average hourly rate. That's easy money. because it's just a reprioritization of existing work. So if we drilled into that number, you can see he spent some time. We've got some time in here that doesn't belong in here. This is customer related. That should be in billable. We've got some CPD training. That's good use of Camp's time. That's like the next best thing you could be doing. We also have 8 hours of data management, and we would say, well, I'm sure that was worthwhile, but was it $116 an hour worthwhile? And is there someone else who could do that for us? Maybe. So perhaps that's something someone else could do, and we could take that off Cam and prioritize that for someone else. Those are the sorts
Reuben, one of the other questions I often get asked is, at what point do we need to put some other people on? So whether that's another income earning person or whether that's an admin person, this is again the report that would actually help you make that decision. Okay, well, I actually have got, an income generator, an accounting or bookkeeping staff member doing this other stuff up to so many hours. I could organise and get a VA, or I could actually hire someone for 20 hours a week. Even for yourself as the practice owner, if there's things that you're doing that could, you're actually tracking this, because it's another thing. I don't think a lot of practice owners are tracking their time particularly. Correct. But if you saw that, it would be, okay, well, why am I doing this when I could be delegating that to another staff member, or I actually could be getting a piece of software to do this, or, something like that. So I think this is another reason that you can actually drill down quite easily, and it's going to show us where we might be able to free up some of our income generating capacity.
Definitely. It is the tendency I see in smaller practices, particularly, I'm talking like, less than 10 staff normally, for productivity to be a little bit lower, because we haven't yet got to the threshold where we can have a dedicated administrator to assist our billable people and take some of that administration off them. And so our billable team would normally be sitting somewhere between 65 to 75% normally. Yeah, and so to make that jump, to keep our billable team focused on customer work so we can make as much money from their efforts as possible, we need to take some of the admin off them. There's a report we use in here called the Practice Performance Report. It basically looks at human performance, or practice as a collection of humans. And there's only really one number I look at on this report, but it's over time. And so if we look at our practice productivity, it looks at all the human effort that goes into our practice, regardless of where it goes, and it says how much of that is spent on customers. And it's a lot lower than you expect. Normally that number there, actually this number over here, but this is the 12-month average. For most practices I meet, that sits between 50 and 60%. It's actually much easier to get it higher for a smaller practice than it is for a larger practice, because they accumulate more layers of admin and management. If you think about all the human effort that goes into a practice, only about 50 to 60% of it is actually spent on customers, and the balance is on management and administration. So if that starts dropping below 40, I do meet larger practices that have like a 45. It doesn't tend to get too low, but 45 to 50%, that could indicate that they're too admin or management heavy, or they don't have basically they've got way too many administrators for the relationship to billable team members. You can also see the opposite. If that number for you was sitting at 70%, that could indicate that, hey, you'd actually make a lot more money. You could actually afford to bring on an administrator, get your billable people more focused on customer work, and you've got like fat there basically to still operate. So if that was up by 60 or more, then that might be a decision we make. But the caveat to all of this is that full timesheets are complete. That is the weakness and the strength of this report. If you're not doing your timesheet as an owner, your administrators aren't doing timesheet because it's not billable, that number is naturally going to be way higher than it actually is. So it does rely on good data. That's all. Great question. Something else, the real value of this team performance report is in this column here, the net write-ups. This is not very easily accessible inside XPM at all, and not to the level of detail you need. So we can see, if I pick on, let's look at Paul over here. Paul was super productive in the month of December. 86% of his time was spent on customers. He generated just short of 12 grand worth of value, but we had to write off 2-3 of that. You'd go, wow, that's actually a little bit higher than I'd expect. So this is his effectiveness. Although he was productive, he was not all that effective at turning his effort into revenue. He could do that by working really long, but just because you're working late at night doesn't mean you're making a lot of money. It just means it takes you longer to do stuff sometimes. So what we want to know is, if we are writing off 20 cents of every dollar of Paul's efforts, why? If we drill into that number, this is the information you need, because it may not be Paul's fault. The first place I'd check would be pricing. What is the nature of these jobs here? It seems to mainly be due to this job. This job here, Nelson, Nancy, and the Nuts annual accounts. This job might have had a $2,000 write-off But this is Paul's share of that $1,600 there. So these are all the like microtransactions that make that up. And before I go and hit up Paul about this, I would just want to look into that job to make sure, to see if this is a pricing problem, or see if this has historically been an underpriced job, maybe, because it could be that it doesn't matter who picked up this job, someone was going to get lumped with it. Yeah, and today it's Paul. But if it's not pricing, then maybe we'd look at the process, and we might ask Paul about that and say, was there anything unusual about this job this year that's going to occur again next year? And if so, then we need to decide, cool, well, what can we do to avoid that next year or to speed that up next year? And lastly, we might ask Paul, because it could be a training deficiency on his part. It could be something new he's never done before, or hasn't done that often, or maybe he didn't get the help he needed from the people around him, maybe. These sorts of things. These are all things we can fix. So that's how you get to the root cause of what that write-off is. And the total value of that every year is, about 200 grand, roughly, per every 10 staff that you have. So it does add up. So drilling in, even where it's positive, it's worth drilling into these, because even though Cam here had a net write-up, so for every $1 of billable time he did in December, we were invoicing $1.11. There could be jobs in here that didn't go well for him. Net write-up could still be hiding some write-offs that are occurring, and some training issues, or some process issues, or some pricing issues. So here's Kevin's Kebabs. This is a job, this is his share of the write-off on that job, just short of $1,000. So I'd ask, that's worth asking about. Might be to do with these major transactions we're doing, perhaps. And you go and ask Cam about that. He'd be the best person to talk to. So that's where the gold is in this report, but everything else flows on from that, where you can see, well, what is our revenue contribution from each staff member? This is what we pay this person. This is the profit we make on that person, and therefore this is the ROI on this person. When we're looking at a particular month, ROIs can be very lumpy, as can revenue. So what we do is we look at it over time. If we click on Paul from our example earlier, if we click on his name, this will show us Paul's performance over time. So we can see whether the write-offs he incurred in December are normal or not. So if I drill into this is the same metrics, just over time. You can see that in December, he had an 86% productivity. His 12-month average is 81, which is still above average, or higher than I'd expect. He's got the right priorities, I would say. He spends 81% of his time, on average, focused on customers. The benefit of looking at this over time is that all the seasonality of the write-offs get washed out, and all the pricing issues disappear. It is unlikely, if he got lumped with a tough job in December, or an underpriced job in December, it is unlikely that that's going to happen every month for him. So the chance of every job he touches all year long being underpriced is unlikely. So we can pretty much say that 8% effectiveness or write-off is probably training or process related, not pricing related. So that's still within the acceptable range for a team member. But what's more interesting to me here, if we look at what he costs us, for every $1 we pay Paul, we are returning $3.14. And so that indicates that I can actually afford to pay, we're currently paying him 50 grand a year. I could probably bump that up to 55, just without getting my calculator out. 55, and we still return $3 for every dollar that we pay him. So our conversation, we might want to talk to him about this or work on this with him to see, drilling into these write-offs to see what we can do to avoid that in future. But that's what we use that ROI for. So normally around KPIs and payment, or pay.
So Reuben, with that, the cost, that's just merely their wage and super, or just wage? Is that just
normally direct cost? Wage and super divided by 12.
Super, yes.
Divided by expected total number of hours, 160 or something. We'll give you a number per hour.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. And that goes back to, I know when a long time ago, when I was in practice, they used to always say that you should be getting 3 times. Now,
it's an old rule, way.
Or even a lot of people are proposing even more than that. Yeah, it's a long time ago. But a lot of people are saying now that you need to have, more than 3 times. But again, what I'm seeing in practice is a lot of people aren't even getting that 3 times. So when they're looking at the profitability and the return those staff are giving them, sometimes we could only be talking about, thousands of dollars. So pretty much nearly breaking even on some staff members. And that also is an issue that needs to be looked at, on a regular basis. But this report, but sometimes, the other thing is people say, well, I haven't got time. I'm already working late at night, weekends, just to get the client work done, let alone to be doing my own practice reporting. I spoke to someone the other day, and when was the last time, you got your own figures up to date? Oh, well, I haven't touched it since December. So like, these are the other things, like when you actually start looking at this, I've always found it to be quite encouraging and inspiring. Even if we don't see the numbers we want to see, it then pushes us to then want to see a better result. So by sort of sticking our head in the sand saying, I don't even think I really want to look at the numbers, we need to be looking at it somehow so we can improve and make it worthwhile for us.
100%. Yeah. Something I see quite regularly, 2 points actually, is this management percentage. The reason we put them in a different bucket is because this is a number you actually want to be lower. Lower is better. You don't want your management team spending heaps of time on customer work. When you're smaller, great, as long as it's higher value stuff. But as you grow bigger, the practices that do best, their management have a productivity of like 20 or 30% or less, because they're spending time selling, business improvement, development, HR, recruitment, all these other things. Yeah, and that's where the time is best spent. They're not here to bring in money anymore. Those days are gone. Those are for the billable team. Yeah, so this would be actually higher than I would not recommend, but higher, on the higher side of what I'd see from a management team. It's tougher when you're small. You're still going to do the work. Someone's got to do the work. But as you get bigger, 10 to 20 staff maybe, or even less than that sometimes, yeah, you want to see that number come down. Yeah, something else I'll just talk to as well is this percentage here. If this was, sometimes when someone's productivity is really good and their write-offs are low, maybe slightly lower than this, the only way you can make more money, or the only way Paul can, we can pay Paul more, or we can make more money from Paul's time, is by moving him onto higher value services. So Paul might be an intermediate accountant, and we don't have him doing some type of work yet. Now that he's nailed all that, he's obviously highly productive and he's converting his effort into revenue. The only way we can basically increase our profitability or revenue from Paul is by getting him into tougher stuff, which will involve training. So that's another decision we make from that number. Yeah.
Those performance, when they come and they want more money, again, we can say, here's the figures. Once you get the KPI,
once you get here, we can do this.
Once you get here,
exactly.
we can talk turkey about it. Until then, actually, no, we can't. So I think we're giving them also more buy-in to actually be more productive, be more mindful on what time they're spending on jobs. And if they are actually doing a lot of out-of-scope work that is getting, bundled into the normal work, they've got to then put their hand up and say, hey, this is extra work we're doing. So it's actually giving them more awareness of the type of stuff that often goes unnoticed to the partner. Yeah.
They just see time. They just think time is time. If I work long, then I'm being a good team member. That's just not the case. Yeah, time does not always equate to revenue. So yeah, one more report I'll just touch on is the open jobs report over here. This is my favorite report because it's the only one that looks at the future and the present. All the other reports are about the past. I can show you write-offs for days about where they've occurred, but I can't help you prevent those without this report. This report will prevent write-offs before it occurs. So we try to encourage our customers to run this weekly, ideally, by client and for a specific job manager. So every job manager will have their own report, basically, that will look at all of their jobs. So if we run this for Billy, this will show us all of Billy's jobs as of today and how they're performing. Depending on, this is actually the slowest report to run. So if it takes too long, I might choose a different manager. It's very dependent on how many jobs Billy is managing. But yeah, I'm sure it'll get there. Three, two, one. It's normally just as I click away that it runs. No, that's okay. I'll try somebody else. Bear with me a second. Cool. Job manager is, I'll just pick Aaron. He's at the top. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have many jobs. Cool, not too bad. He's actually got really not many jobs, but should work for our purposes. So these are all of Aaron's jobs as of today. And what if I was Aaron and ran this on a Monday? That's good incentive for me and my team to be doing their timesheets before I run this report, because what I'd do is I'd sort by remaining time would be one way you'd run this. every job would have an estimate of how long we're expecting things to take. And then I can compare with how much time has actually gone in. And then the value of that is I can look at that by job and then down to the tasks. So I can see which part of this job, or I can identify a bit earlier when something might be a bit harder for somebody, where a team member might be struggling, or I might need to say, hey bro, do you need a hand? Or is there something that's out of scope occurring here? Or can you assist you in some way, basically? Do I need to have a conversation with the customer maybe? So this is the level of detail, and using remaining time helps you intervene earlier to prevent write-offs before they occur. The downside of remaining time is that it involves an estimate for every task on a job. It gives you the most detail and the best chance of intervening early. So for people that do have a write-off problem in their practice, where they're writing off, a good 15% of all of their efforts, I'd encourage using estimated time on their tasks. Some people, they don't have a write-off problem, and they also don't have time to update all the estimated times. There's no quick way to do it in XPM, unfortunately. We use budget instead. So budget's just one number you load in against the job at the beginning of the job. The job manager does it, or the person who sets up the job, and it lets you compare your billable value against your budgeted value. And there's a column over here called remaining budget. You can sort it in much the same way, and it'll let you identify at the job level where a job has gone over budget. Some of the time though, that's too late, because there's, it might be the BAS return that took way longer, but we're now at the annual accounts and that's over budget. The time to intervene was back at the BAS return. Yes, and that's how the benefit of having an estimated time in there versus having a job level budget. And if you can, both. So if I was Aaron and I was working on this and this has gone over time, I would click into this actual time and I would go and talk to myself, and I'll say, hey Aaron, what's going on here? Or do you need some assistance here to prevent that write-off before it occurs, basically? There's one other column that's quite useful in here sometimes, is this day's last timesheet. When you're Aaron and you're managing 100 to 200 jobs at a time, there's going to be jobs that get forgotten. And so that day's last timesheet says that this job is still open because it's on the open jobs report, and it has not had a timesheet for 347 days. And so if that's like an active job, then it either needs to be closed or it needs to be written off, or we need to find out where it's at. We're waiting on somebody, or it's been forgotten. We need to jump into it. So anything over 30 days, really, you want to kind of investigate to say, has this been forgotten, or where are we at with this job? And that kind of contributes to reducing our WIP balance as well. So, but keeping on top of this one report, if each of your job managers, you can export that out or have them log in and access this themselves. All the other reports dramatically improve because people are actually having the conversations they need to earlier than they otherwise would be after the fact, after the write-offs have been good or after the job's been closed. So, I think we touched on almost everything, but that's the highlights anyway.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, Reuben. So, if there's any questions, please, let us know. But maybe, Reuben, you could just, as we're finishing up, let people know how they can contact you, and also, the pricing of this sort of, of this software.
Cool. So this
very helpful software.
Thanks. Yeah. This is $199 per month for your first 10 staff, and then $100 for every additional 10 staff after that. So it ends up being, if you've got 10 staff, ends up being about $1,900 a year, roughly. And the way it pays for itself pretty quickly is by improving your productivity, repricing your services, reducing your write-offs. Just to give you an idea, for a 10 staff practice, normally we can recover, depending on the state of the practice, obviously, but what we've done for people is we've recovered about $200,000 in additional revenue by improving their team's productivity, just by measuring it, basically, and telling them what it needs to be, and them having those conversations. And then an additional $200,000 worth of revenue in write-offs by getting them from negative 15% write-offs to negative 5% write-offs. That takes a bit longer to do, normally within 6 months-ish, but within the year, that's normally the kind of results we achieve. That's how we just.
Yeah, that's good.
What was your other part of your question? The to get in touch with
how
us.
To contact you, to get in touch with you. And
we're all over the internet. You can find us at linkreporting.com. We've got a really popping YouTube channel, Link Academy, if you look that up. And we're happy to talk to everybody about anything related to XPM, whether it's moving to XPM, using XPM better. We've written a book about XPM. And so, if you have questions, we answer them all day long, whether you're a customer or not.
Actually, they might send me the link on how that book actually, because that might be a good, I can pop that in as, you know, for people just to learn. Because I mean, this is the sort of stuff, you know, the practice management stuff and the stuff that I teach and coach and mentor accounting practice owners. This is the stuff no one often has taught you. So, you know, if you've worked for another accounting practice, which you all would have, a lot of them, or the majority of them, I would say, hold their cards very close to their chest. So they don't tell you the KPIs. They don't tell you that you're trying to get the 3-time multiple. They're not telling you all this stuff. You know, even if you were managing staff or managing a department, they don't look at that stuff. And so it's really, you know, when we go and do the work for ourselves and get our own practices, this is the stuff that we often just overlook, because we don't even need to know, don't even know we have to be managing it or measuring it. So yeah, I find that's a really common issue. So yeah, so the book would be great if you can send me the link and I'll pop that in the group. And I've got a lovely message in there from Paul, who's saying that he's in the process of setting up Link with Reuben. And I must say he goes above and beyond to assist with the implementation. And I'm looking forward to having the information available to better manage my business. So good luck with that, Paul. I'm sure you're
Paul
going
must be,
to...
your commission's in the mail, my friend.
Well, and as I said, I was only introduced to it by one of my clients, and that's why I really love the product. And you know, everyone here in the Balance Firm, if you're watching this on replay or if you're new to the group, I only endorse stuff that I either have used myself or my clients are using or I truly believe in, and I don't endorse products for endorsement's sake. I choose not to get any, you know, monetary rewards for doing this, because I actually want, and if there was anything, I would rather that go to you. But, you know, I know the service is just amazing. So that's the way I do it, because I do really want everyone to have a better practice and a better life. And that may not involve me actually working in your practice, but it may actually be putting you in contact with someone who can. And I'm really, you know, that's exactly why I do what I do.
Cheers, Amanda.
Yeah. So any other questions? And I guess maybe if you pop in the chat box, what was your biggest takeaway from today that, you know, from Reuben's presentation, from maybe some of the metrics or KPIs that he shared? Were there any, I need to start tracking that? Or does it, yeah, motivate you? I'd love you to pop in the chat box for those that are here on the live video, just so we can get a bit of an idea. Everyone's just a bit shy. But look, it was while I'm waiting for people to pop that in there. Thank you, Reuben, so much for giving up some of your time and sharing this wonderful product with us and the details, and just, you know, yeah, just that knowledge that I know you probably, and I do talk about it, you know, day in, day out. But it's great to be sharing this stuff. And, you know, with the practice owners we've got, you know, I know everyone's busy with lodgements, BASs, JobKeeper and all the rest of it, but this is actually a really great time for you to be thinking about your own practice, about spending time on your practice management and getting it to where you want to be in one on. So it's, you know, honouring, you know, what you wanted out of your practice when you first started and getting you back on track if things aren't, you know, giving you that monetary reward, and also the satisfaction that you're doing, you know, you're doing all this work for nothing. How do we get you not to be doing that? So yeah. So thanks, Reuben, and thanks everyone for coming on live.
Great. Cheers, Amanda. Thanks,
okay.
team. We'll catch you later.
And thank you. Thanks, Reuben. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, you too. See ya.
Bye, everyone.